All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking a seriously grim graphic novel style fable that dissects one of the absolute most dangerous traps of the human mind, the profound danger of looking backward. We're looking at a story centered on a set of ghostly kings and their encounter with the philosophy of Zarathustra. And let me tell you, this isn't just some dusty old myth. It is a visceral, dark exploration of exactly what happens when we let nostalgia overpower our drive for the future. We're going to unpack the philosophy, the striking imagery, and the very real lessons it holds for us right now. Bringing the rot of the past into the present. Wow, that is just an incredibly evocative quote, right? It hooks you instantly with this gruesome, completely undeniable image. And this is really the core warning of our source material today. The text argues that clinging desperately to the past doesn't resurrect glory, it only brings decay. When we try to drag dead eras into our current reality, we aren't preserving anything beautiful. Instead, we are quite literally infecting our present potential with the rot of things that have long since died. Section 1. The Flawed Present and the Anchor of Disgust. So, to really grasp how these kings get trapped, we first have to look at what they're actually running from. In philosophical terms, specifically the Fichtean dialectic, we start with our thesis, which is an acknowledgement that modern society and the present moment are deeply flawed. And the core of this stagnation is this fascinating concept called the psychic anchor. You see, the kings look around, they see the flaws, and they are completely repulsed. They're so consumed by their hatred for contemporary politics and modernity that it breeds a paralyzing level of disgust. This disgust functions exactly as a psychic anchor. It fixates them completely on the past, rendering them fundamentally incapable of moving forward. They become so laser-focused on what they loathe about the present that they lose all sight of what they could potentially create in the future. Because of the psychic anchor, these kings aren't looking to lead their people into a new era. Not at all. They are completely wallowing in nostalgia. They're seeking a literal resurrection of the past to find what they call the warrior spirit of their ancestors, which is a vision of nobility and strength they believe is completely lost. They demand the impossible. They want a figure who embodies a resurrection of a dead time, rather than a leader who can actually build something new out of the ashes. Moving into Section 2, the Dark Apotheosis and the Three Parables of Regress. Our source material illustrates the tragic consequence of this regressive mindset through three insanely dark, mythic, and slightly absurdist parables. The text calls this their dark apotheosis. Let's step into this grim, nihilistic world for a second. Picture this like a moody, shadowed comic book panel. In the parable of the ossuary skin, a king is so revolted by contemporary politics that he descends into the crypts of his forefathers. He literally peels the desiccated skin from the corpses of ancient conquerors and stitches it to his own flesh. He thinks this is going to make him the higher man, pulsating with the old warrior spirit. But of course, the dead skin just brings the rot of the past into the present. He achieves his apotheosis, sure, but only as a god of carrion, ruling over a kingdom of dust. He realizes way too late that by physically wearing the past, he ensured he would never ever have a future. Then we get the second story, which shifts from physical horror to this deep spiritual regression. In the parable of the bile chalice, a sovereign tries to escape his disgust for modernity by drinking only the bitter bile of his own memories. He completely refuses the innovation of the living, just rejecting the present entirely. And as he withers away, his soul essentially collapses into a black hole. He becomes the deity of the great absence, a being existing only in a void between what was and what can never be again. His refusal to embrace the living world literally consumed his very capacity to exist. And that brings us to the devastating conclusion of the third story, the parable of the gilded noose. A king tries to build a throne out of the limitations of the present, but because he's just wallowing in nostalgia, he decorates it with the heavy gold of his ancestors' crowns. As he ascends, that heavy ancestral gold becomes a literal noose around his neck. He is slowly strangled by the very traditions he worshipped, left hanging as a monument of static regret, executed by the very traditions they worshipped. What a powerful metaphor, right? Those who cannot transcend the past are eventually executed by it. Section 3. Zarathustra's Vision, Tradition versus Innovation. Okay, let's break the dark spell of those kings and shift our focus. Enter Zarathustra. Zarathustra shatters the king's illusion with a synthesizing wisdom that cuts right through their paralyzing nostalgia. He sees the exact same flawed world the kings see, but his reaction couldn't be more different. And this brilliantly maps out the Fichtean dialectic for us, showing exactly how Zarathustra's path shatters the king's stagnation. Think of it in 3 parts. First, we have the thesis, the flawed present. It's broken, that's just a fact. Second, the antithesis, the king's nostalgic regress. That's their doomed attempt to run backward to escape the flaws. But third, we have Zarathustra providing the synthesis, creative transcendence. He doesn't deny the flaws, and he certainly doesn't run from them. He synthesizes the reality of the present to create a completely new way forward. So the big takeaway here is the contrast between these 2 visions. The king's vision is regressive, paralyzed, and overwhelmingly nostalgic. They lose their capacity to create because they're entirely focused on perceived past glories. Zarathustra's vision, on the other hand, is transcendent, creative, and radically forward-looking. His goal is to move beyond the limitations of both the past and the present to forge something entirely new. You see, Zarathustra completely flips the script on the void and disgust. For the kings, disgust was that psychic anchor, dragging them down into the void. But Zarathustra teaches that the void and current disgust are absolutely not an endpoint. They shouldn't be anchors. Instead, they are the exact raw fuel needed to catalyze creative innovation. The flaws of the present are the sparks. If you are disgusted by the way things are, Zarathustra argues you have to use that energy not to resurrect the dead, but to create the future. Section 4. Escaping the Gilded Noose and Modern Personal Growth. So, what does this mythic philosophy mean for us today? I mean, we probably aren't down in a crypt stitching ancient skin to our bodies, right? But think about it. How often do we let ossified traditions or past successes strangle our current potential? How often do we let a distaste for our current circumstances trap us in memories of the good old days? Let's look at how this translates into actionable steps for our own lives, just to make sure we aren't being strangled by our own gilded nooses. First, we've got to recognize present flaws not as reasons to quit, but as catalysts for change. Second, cut the psychic anchor of disgust. Don't let hatred of the current moment paralyze you. Third, stop trying to resurrect past glories. What worked yesterday won't necessarily build tomorrow. And fourth, actively choose forward innovation over ossified tradition. Which brings us to the ultimate question we have to ask ourselves after going through this dark fable. Take a hard look at where you're putting your energy. Are you taking the flaws of your present and actually using them as fuel to build a transcendent, creative future? Or are you, like those ghostly kings, just weaving your own gilded noose out of nostalgia? The choice is entirely yours.